Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine. One of my favourite events over the last few years has been the Cape Wine Auction. 2 years ago I emceed it for the first time, and last year I hosted the auction as well. And with the help of some very generous people and some wonderful items, we raised a quite remarkable 15 million rand, and every cent of that going to charity, a series of charities across the winelands. So as we look ahead to next weekend's event, happening for the first time at Rupert and Rothschild, 4 of the estates, 4 of the vineyards are involved in and are supporting both the lots and the auction as a whole. And the first of those is a little place up in Robertson. It's Excelsior. Now Excelsior is as well known for its horses as it is for its wine, some fine thoroughbreds, but they also make some very pleasant wine indeed. I've been to Excelsior a few times, a lovely little tasting venue, very quiet, very pleasant, and a delightful stop off if you're in the Robertson area. Not surprisingly, this wine is made by people called De Vet. We are in Robertson. There are only about 5 surnames in Robertson, and De Vet is the foremost amongst them, particularly when it comes to the wine industry. So the Excelsior wine features, if you win the Robertson lot at the Cape Wine Auction, it is 2 nights stay in luxury for 10 people out at Excelsior. It also includes some of the fabulous Chardonnay from just up the road at De Vetsoff. We've had that on the show before, and the chance to nip up the road to Springfield have also featured on the show in the past to have lunch. But Excelsior, who are first and foremost the hosts here, and this is their Viognier. Now it's a very simple, unaffected wine. Excelsior's wines are generally very inexpensive. You're never going to pay more than 100 rand, and quite often quite a lot less than that. It's the kind of wine they're happy making, very blue collar stuff, and happily so. You got off your horse after a long day of training, and this will sort you out very nicely indeed. Viognier, we're seeing a little bit more of it drunk on its own, is a single varietal. Again, another lovely wine with food, and this is a very simple example of why that Excelsior lot is so appealing. So there we go, nice simple example of what Excelsior are so good at, making uncomplicated wine and making it very nicely indeed. We're seeing a bit more of Viognier now in the market, people drinking it as a single varietal, goes beautifully with food. This has got a bit of an apricot flourish to it. It's an inexpensive wine, it's a lovely wine, and if you buy the lot, I think there'll be a few bottles of this going down when you do. Next up, some wine from an estate I know rather well. Glen Carlou is next door to Backsburg, and Backsburg is where I got married, so this part of the world very close to my heart. Glen Carlou makes some terrific wine. They're also part of the Cape Wine Auction, giving away a lot that includes a lunch or dinner for 20 people at Glen Carlou, paired by Glen Carlou's wines, including, I suspect, some of their Chardonnay. Now you can see it's a very uncomplicated bottle. There's no air and grace about this particular one. It's an entry-level wine, but their Chardonnay I've found over the years has been very, very drinkable. This is their unwooded 2014 Chardonnay. So if you think back to our episode for people who don't like Chardonnay, my friend Caroline and others, this doesn't have that big plank on the mouth, an unwooded Chardonnay, which is a little unusual, but provides you with a slightly different perspective on your Chardonnay. So this isn't made with wood. How do they make it? Well, instead, this is done in concrete tanks. Now, while wooded Chardonnay will give you those lovely hints of oak, you're probably not going to pick up a bag of PPC on this. Instead, it'll just be a slightly cleaner and slightly smoother Chardonnay with the citrus a little more pronounced and without quite so much of the wood. Still probably a little bit of smokiness, but let me find out. And that smokiness is there, and again, it's a gentle wine. It's not overly complicated. Go very nicely with a fresh bit of fish. It's got some lovely flavour to it. Nice, simple wine, and part of a Glen Carlou lot that I think is one of the better ones on show. Dinner for 20 people. There's also some accommodation at Carcliff, a lovely piece of William Boshoff art. This is a really nice piece. On now to Lourensford. Now, I've spent quite a bit of time at Lourensford because for a number of years that's where the Absa Cape Epic finished, and I've hosted that now for 12, 13, 14 years. It's been a great run, and I enjoyed a lot of time here at Lourensford. And Lourensford join the auction with an item that includes a few nights at Christo Visa's spot in the Kalahari, which I believe is magnificent. There's the chance to go and visit Lourensford, and there's the chance to come away with some Lourensford wine. And I think, although they make some great wine across the board, this might not be a bad selection. It is their limited release Viognier. We had a Viognier a little earlier from Excelsior. If that was the more entry-level variety, then this is slightly more polished and certainly a little more expensive. So I found over this summer, I try not to give the impression that I don't like Sauvignon Blanc, because I do like Sauvignon Blanc. I like Sauvignon Blanc very much, but I like to find alternatives, and I like to introduce people to something beyond Sauvignon Blanc, because I think that's the default setting for so many drinkers when it comes to summer. It's warm, I'll have a glass of Sauvignon Blanc. This is a little heavier, it's got a little bit more substance to it, but it still drinks very, very nicely on a hot summer's day. And yes, it's great with food, but you can quite pleasantly have a glass or two by the side of the pool and not need anything to wash it down with. Slightly more golden colour than a Sauvignon Blanc of a similar age. And as you can see from the rather large pair of stickers, there are a number of people who think this is quite nice. And that's very nice indeed. It might only be a 2014, but it feels like it's a good 5 or 6 years older than that. It's very, very smooth. It's got a nice depth to it, a nice softness to it, and a richness to it as well. It's a really good wine. You get 24 bottles plus all the other cool stuff when you buy this lot. 24 bottles of limited release Viognier, you could do worse. And then something very special indeed. A few weeks ago we did a show on Merlot, and I waxed lyrical about Caroline Martin's Reserve Merlot from Creation. It is quite splendid. There are a couple of other wines that she does rather well, and she has two particular ranges. They're not inexpensive, but they're worth the investment. The Art of Pinot Noir, and this, The Art of Chardonnay. So Creation sits out in the Hemelanada Valley, and part of the reason Creation are involved in the auction is they support the Pebbles Project, which is doing some great work with education out in that region, early childhood development education in the Hemelanada Valley. And the prize that you win, should you get this particular lot, includes some of this wine, includes a trip out to Creation, which I highly recommend. There's a 4-night penthouse apartment stay at the waterfront. There's some really cool stuff in there, and a rather large bottle of the Reserve Pinot Noir. It's the Art of Chardonnay that I'm particularly interested in here though, and it is such an art form. When you go out to Creation, the food and wine tasting they do is outstanding, and the food really does pay tribute to the wine, but as is always the case with excellent wine, it's pretty hard for the food to quite match up. That is luxurious. It sits deeply and richly and regally on the palate. It's a huge big mouthful of wine. Probably the only downside is opening it quite so soon. This 2015 could have done itself even more justice in 10 years' time, but that's always the case with good Chardonnay. They don't make much of it. This is bottle 771 of just 3,050. It's only 3,049 to go. Well, I suspect a number of those have already been drunk. It is the art of Chardonnay, and art it most certainly is. So this, amongst the many wines on show at the Cape Wine Auction, which I'll be hosting again next weekend at Rupert and Rothschild. Go and have a look online, see the wine on offer, see the lots on offer, and also have a look at the charities, as the Cape Wine Auction puts more money into extremely good causes. Cheers.